One of the things that frightens humanity today is sickness. That is why people seldom visit a doctor unless the sickness is felt already. The first reading today leads us to hope. When Prophet Isaiah says, "Tell those who are frightened, whose hearts are frightened, to be strong and fear not." Why? Isaiah had said, "Here is your God who will save you. Here is that God who is the source of good health and life. He can restore back to life, and not just that, abundant life for that matter." That is why the gospel of today is a story of healing. Although not so fatal illness, it's being deaf and mute, but it has a significance in humans' ordinary life. Because this is necessary in our communicating and in building relationship. To speak, to listen to is very necessary. That is why Jesus had performed healing of this kind of illness. Before we come to the reflection of healing, let me first dwell on the cause of the illness. As I have mentioned, one that frightens humanity is illness. But we should be even more frightened when we separate ourselves from the giver of life, when we separate ourselves from God, who is the giver of life. And how do we separate ourselves from God? When we commit sin. It is sin that separates us from God. It is sin, supposedly, that frightens us, because sin brings us not just illness, brings us death. Why in particular, in today's gospel, being the man was presented having been mute and deaf. If we try to examine what is happening now, mainly the cause of sin and our separation from God can be traced from the use of our mouth, the use of our tongues. Tongues, our mouths, were used not to proclaim anymore what is true, not to proclaim anymore what is good. Often, in this time of ours, we use tongues to destroy truth, to destroy life, to destroy what is good, to destroy even the name of God. And consequent to that, we fail to listen to what is good, to listen to what is true. What are the examples of these? Our mouth supposedly should bring one another to relationship. Should bring one another not just to relationship among ourselves, but to relationship of humanity and God. For God sent His Word, that this Word may be the source of relationship of humanity and God. But what had happened? Many times, there is the destruction of the other. And one of the example of that is gossips. Gossip destroys relationship. Gossip destroys communion of persons. Gossip, as as Pope Francis had said, poisons, intoxicates humanity. It comes from the mouth. It comes from the word of the tongue that supposedly it should bring everyone into a relationship, into friendship, so that ultimately we can build a relationship with God and have experience that communion with God. Then we come to the healing process. Jesus could have said immediately, Ephphatha. He has power to do that. But he would want to show to us the healing processes so that we too can learn from Him. Because sometimes our words are not powerful to heal, but we can learn from the process. In the gospel of today, the first line, people brought to Him a deaf man and mute. People brought to Him. What does that mean? He did not just go to Jesus alone. He was accompanied by people. And in that way, there is already the beginning of healing, because he joined himself with the others, and the others express their concern for the person. That is why they exerted effort to bring the deaf man to Jesus. What is the implication? The implication is building, when we have that kind of relationship with one another, and when we establish a good relationship with one another, and we have that community, healing takes place. When a person is left alone, when he is sick, and nobody attends to his needs, and nobody attends to the person, healing is too long to come. But when there is a community that attends to the person, healing comes so short a time. The second step that Jesus had done, he took the man away from the crowd. There is the mention of the crowd, which is different from community, which I mentioned. Because crowd has no compassion, while community has compassion. That's why he took the man away from the crowd so that they may be together by themselves. And in that particular situation, Jesus would want to tell us that the person who was sick, the person who who was neglected, the person who was not given attention, come to Jesus, and he found a place in the heart of Jesus. That is why he felt at home with Jesus. One of the sickness of this generation of ours is isolating ourselves and being selfish and being alone. That is why some people are not at home with the other. They avoid others. If they knew the person would be coming and he sees from afar, he would avoid the person because he does not want to meet the person, because he is not at home with the person. Sometimes, even in families, children are not at home with their own families. Children are not at home with their parents. Parents are not at home with their children. They left their children alone. Being at home can help, can address healing. There is already that peace within, because there is the feeling of being at home with the other person. Then Jesus touched the ears and touched the tongue. When Jesus touched the ears and the tongue, he did not just touch those parts, but he reaches out to the whole of the person, that he accepted the person no matter who he is, no matter how defective the person is. He accepted him. And that is why only later he said, Ephphatha, be open. Because he first welcomed the person. He first reached out to the person and touched the person. In my reflection, there is a pastoral implication of these. Why I said in particular, Jesus touched the tongue and touched the ears. So much so that the person can speak already what is true, can proclaim the goodness of God. That is why at the last part, even if Jesus had said, do not tell anyone, people had shouted, people had announced, people had proclaimed how well Jesus had done. They proclaimed the truth. They proclaim goodness. They proclaim the mercy of God. That is why there is healing. Healing of tongue, healing of ears, that we may listen to God. Not listen to any whispers of the world, to any whisper of sinfulness, to any whisper of Satan, but only listen to God, listen to his word, that we may truly proclaim also his word to the world, that we may proclaim what is true. Let us beg God that we may all be healed, not just the other illnesses that we have, in particular the illness of the world today, especially not proclaiming the truth, especially that there is now the presence of fake news, of lies, of distorted truths. Let us beg God, let us beg Jesus that we may be healed, that we may be able to proclaim to the world the truth, the goodness of God, the presence of God, that we may not destroy the name of God, rather worship Him, worship His name while still on earth. This is the implication of the readings today. That Jesus can just narrate and can just utter that word, but He gave us the process because we have experienced that in this generation of ours, that many times we face not anymore the truth, but lies. Let us be instruments of truths. Let us be instruments of God. Let our lives worship true God, worship His name on earth.